Hi, I'm Natalie Phillips-Mason, and this is the Open Wired podcast. Through respectful curiosity, we have candid conversations that explore human diversity and how to create inclusive ecosystems for all minds, bodies, and identities. My guests are change makers who are doing the practical, sometimes unglamorous work to make inclusion real. In case we haven't met, I'm Natalie, founder of Inclusive Change. I champion human talent with a neurodiversity lens, using my background in organisational change management to help organisations value and normalise human differences. We have a strong focus on sensory-friendly working, and sensory friendliness will come into almost every conversation we talk about. In this episode, I'm speaking with Sarah James, founder of The Sensory Specialist. Sarah is a mum. She's also an ex-psychology teacher turned small business owner, designing sensory products and working with local councils to create sensory-friendly spaces. Like many of my guest stories, The Sensory Specialist is the result of Sarah identifying gaps in sensory support, both in the retail marketplace and in educational and public settings. Sarah shares her journey as a teacher and a parent and the impact the NDIS has had on her customers and her business. Open Wired is recorded on the land of the Bunurong people. We acknowledge the richness and diversity of Indigenous communities and the wisdom of storytelling that has been passed down from generation to generation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Open Wired conversations are for interest only. A reminder that we do not provide medical or clinical advice, medical assessments or diagnoses, legal or employee relations advice. Please consult with a qualified healthcare provider or other relevant professional for specific concerns related to your mental health or any medical conditions. If you do need a transcript, that will be available via Apple Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, thank you for having me. So good to be here.
And thank you for joining me today. So firstly, let's unpack your business, The Sensory Specialist. Can you tell us what products it is that The Sensory Specialist brings to market?
That's a good question because, well, it's actually quite a difficult question because we have such a range of things. So when we look at our products, we've got different range based on the need or the setting that we're looking at. So we have a whole range of products that are developed for schools. So inclusive tools for schools to help with keeping kids focused, calm. It could be for kids who are neurodiverse. So helping them with active movement, seating, fidgets, weighted items, all those sort of things. We also have a variety of items that are based on around sensory rooms or sensory spaces. And that involves soft furnishings, lots of different lighting like LED bubble tubes. And we've also got a home range as well. Things like padded floor mats, giant crash mat pillows, all those sort of things as well for the house. So we're kind of a curated one-stop shop for all things sensory.
Okay, so you've talked about schools in there, you talked about home, and you talked about sensory rooms. Mm-hmm. And we know that certainly around Melbourne and in Australia at the moment and in a number of overseas areas, there's this emerging design element, I guess, where we are seeing more sensory spaces. What have you seen in terms of the way in which is this a trend, do you think? Do you think that this is coming from a place where we're just becoming better educated around sensory needs? And which parts of your market are you seeing kind of the strongest take-up?
So when we look at a trend, what we expect with a trend is it will go up, but then it may come down. What I would say is that with this, there is a trend, but hopefully just an upward one that keeps going upward. Because of the amount of research now, we're a lot more informed and we're a lot more educated about the need for these spaces. There's a lot of research now on the actual impact that they actually have. Yeah, what we're seeing now is that more major venues are getting involved in accepting that, okay, if we're going to host an event, we actually have to have a space for people that they can actually go to retreat to and feel safe. Also, local venues are starting to get more on board of that. So we just did a bit out at Caulfield Park. There's like a community venue, and people can actually hire this sensory room now to host like small events or meetings, even things like play groups. But yeah, we experienced it in January. We took our kids to the Australian Open, and the Australian Open this year, I would have to say its inclusivity and its accessibility was really, really good. They had 3 sensory rooms that were scattered throughout the park. And I can tell you that we visited all 3. So my 7-year-old, he's neurotypical, but he gets quite a lot of anxiety when we're in like noisy, highly crowded areas. That triggers his nervous system response. We actually visited the 3 different sensory rooms. It was really interesting for me to see that through a lived experience as a mother as well. And funnily enough, some of my products are actually in the Margaret Court Arena sensory room. So we went in there, and because he knows all of my products, because we've got, we test them all and they're all through the house. We went in there and he said, "Mum, that man, he's lying on your mushy mat." And I said, "Yeah, because adults like to come to these places too." It was really good awareness for him to kind of learn that it's okay to go to these spaces, that they're not just for kids, they're for a variety of different people. What we noticed in these sensory rooms was that I would say it was about 50-50, probably half of the people that were in there were children and the other half were actually grown adults. So these rooms, they cater for everybody, and it just gives people the ability to go to these events and actually have a safe space to go to reset. What I found with him was he took about 10 to 15 minutes of him being in that space, and you could physically see his nervous system calming down. Like he was starting to settle. He was feeling more regulated. He started becoming more chatty, more happy again. After about 15 minutes, he was like, "All right, let's go." And then off we went out, watched some more tennis, went through the crowds again, and then about an hour or so later, he'd be like, "Oh, Mum, do you think we could go back to another room?" So it's just sort of breaking down that barrier of like allowing people to get out to these events or venues or activities or whatever it is, actually being able to stay there. Whereas ordinarily, it would have escalated, and I probably would have had to take him home. It's pretty powerful, these spaces.
I have adult children. You mentioned mothers group. It would have been quite extraordinary for us as a mothers group nearly 23 years ago to have access to a space like that. I actually live quite close to that venue that you spoke about. So I'd love to go down and have a look at that, because I think it would be quite an incredible offer for mothers groups and for parent groups. Really interesting. Going back to kind of your career and your background, you were a teacher. Was that in high school or in tertiary?
In high school. So I taught from year 7 all the way up to year 12. But yeah, I taught year 12 psychology for like most of my career. So that's where my passion kind of lies. And I've got obviously a university background in education and psychology as well. So that kind of has given me, I guess, the background and the knowledge into, how the brain works. But then also when you're teaching, you come across every single range of child and every single type of learner. They might be neurodiverse. I had some that were deaf, some that had cerebral palsy. It just gave me that lived experience.
Did you have many options when you were teaching to enable you to adapt your teaching style? And were there any sensory aids that you had access to as you were teaching?
I feel like that's where it becomes problematic, because in high school, there's a lot of stigma involved. By the time the kids get to high school, they don't want to stand out and be seen as different. Although we know that, something like a wobble stool or like a pocket-sized hand fidget can be really beneficial to keeping them calm or keeping them focused, they don't want their peers to see it. So I would say, when I was actually teaching in high school, there was very little sensory supports at all. Whereas if you compared that to the primary school settings are pretty well equipped with, the basic things. Like you'll go into most primary school rooms now, and they'll have at least like a wobble cushion or a foot wedge, or they might have a beanbag seat, all these sort of things. But in high school, absolutely very, very limited. They did have good things like I had a few students who were deaf, and they would bring in like what they call their Roger system. That would be like a thing that I would wear around my neck, and then that would amplify my voice into their hearing piece. So those sort of things were really helpful. But in terms of actual sensory aids in high school, very limited.
What kind of shifted? What was it that really made you change your career and actually invest in setting up the sensory specialist? Because it's one thing to say, I'd like to focus in a different space. It's another, and I certainly know what this feels like because I'm in a very similar position. It's another to invest your time, your energy, your resources into actually setting up a business. So what was the catalyst for that shift?
The catalyst, I would say, was actually from my personal life. Right before COVID, I became a single mum. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. My 1-year-old wasn't even walking. He was crawling. And then we went into COVID lockdowns. I, at the time, was still on maternity leave from my teaching position, but I still had my teaching position to go back to. We were in the COVID lockdowns, and I thought, you know what, I can't really go back to teaching because I've got these 2 very young children. Actually getting them into like childcare and kinder was very difficult because of COVID. And I was like, what am I going to do? At the same time, I had these 2 children by myself. I was going through like the trauma of separating, managing 2 children on my own. For me to sort of cope with it, I started putting my energy into making these sensory play activities for them at home to try and keep them engaged and regulated. And I kind of wanted to keep them learning while they're at home. It was sort of, I guess, when Instagram was fairly newish, and I started posting these sensory play ideas on Instagram. And then because everyone else was also at home struggling with their little kids, I started getting this micro following of these parents, and they're sending me these messages and like, oh, this is amazing. Can you do something else? And can you send us this? And so then after that, it kind of graduated into me then making these sensory play kits and taking them to local craft markets. From the local craft markets, I would sell out. And it was like, okay, there's clearly a niche and a need for this market. What could I do with it? From there, then the schools reopened. From the schools reopening, there was kind of, I don't want to use the word crisis, but there was a lot of challenging behavior with these kids returning. And so what I was seeing with my previous colleagues was that they were feeling completely stressed and completely burnt out. And so I thought, okay, there's also a need to try and support these teachers in the classroom and to help regulate these kids in the classroom. So all of these things kind of combined led me to like get this business up and running. And I sort of started like with a really, really limited range back in 2020. As it got more traction, I didn't even really have any funding to even do any advertising. To be completely transparent with you, it all happened organically. So it all happened through either word of mouth, through these social media followings, and then just organically through Google as well. Like I actually did not pay a cent for marketing for like the first 3 years, I would say. It all happened organically. And from there, it's sort of just grown and evolved as I've seen like the different sort of needs and the trends in what people are needing. We obviously got NDIS registered as well. So that kind of brought a new element of customers in as well.
I'm interested in how the NDIS shaped the landscape for you to do the work that you do. I mean, the NDIS is obviously a very large, it's a monolith of a system. You mentioned that you registered for NDIS. How has the NDIS shaped that landscape for you and for your business?
It's an interesting one. What our biggest challenge has been is that there's a real grey area of it where like a lot of our customers are like a strong part of our customer base are NDIS participants, and they do use their NDIS funding to purchase with us. But there's a real grey area of some people are getting their claims passed and some people aren't. The frustration that I hear is like, well, why can they get it covered and why can't I get it covered? At the end of the day, all I can really say is, well, it depends on your plan and it depends on your goals. And the other issue is sometimes it might depend on your plan manager or your support worker or whoever lodges the claim. So It's been a tricky one to navigate. So, for example, we're the only NDIS provider that creates hearing aid pilot caps for deaf babies and children. And so what that cap does is it holds the hearing aid or the cochlear implants in place and stops them from being able to get their hands in and pull them out and chew them or throw them away or whatever. And even things like that, some parents have had the response, no, that's parental responsibility. But it's a safety issue. If they throw away their hearing aids or they get lost at childcare, that's $3,000. So it's a very grey sort of area, I suppose, and it's very fluid. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year, because we know we've got the Thriving Kids program rolling out that they have now pushed back from July. Now it's going to be pushed back to October. A lot of these participants who were getting funding for these, inclusive support tools will no longer be on the NDIS. So again, that will mean that any sort of tool like our wobble stools or crash mat pillows or whatever it may be will then have to come out of the parents' own finances.
I think that the point is that I would say most parents, and from someone with lived experience, most parents would feel that sensory aids were a non-negotiable, and the right sensory aids were a non-negotiable. So, yeah, I feel like we need to just put that to a whole other series. But to your point, the NDIS can be a game changer or it can be a barrier depending on where you sit in that kind of spectrum of haves and have-nots, to your point. So from your perspective, what are the most commonly misunderstood aspects of sensory needs?
There's a lot of individual differences. For example, some person may be highly sensory seeking, so they would actually crave having like crash mat pillows to throw themselves into, whereas you might then have somebody who is, sensory averse, and so they might benefit from things like having the noise cancelling earmuffs, the quiet room that's very, very dark and has a lot of low stimulation.
To your point around research, scientific evidence, I think there is so much more in the occupational therapy space, and Inclusive Change has a very strong focus in retail, and we're about to launch our next research study into the sensory experience of neurodivergent and non-neurodivergent people in retail spaces. And we talked earlier in our conversation about the fact that there are so many venues and public spaces now that are recognising the need for spaces for sensory regulation, whatever that may be, high seeking or low seeking. You have created some really strong partnerships with large retail brands. So you are at the moment in high street brands, if I call it that, so your Chemist Warehouses, your Baby Buntings, for example. Can you tell us a little bit about how that journey has been for you in creating those partnerships with large retail brands such that you actually have your products on shelves in some of these brands? Because, health, beauty and wellness is quite a saturated sector. Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you went in that journey, and was it easy?
Not easy. I would say that I'm a hustler, Natalie. It was like, if they say no, I come back and I say, well, why not? No, it was definitely a process. I think when I approached Bunnings, part of my bargaining power was the fact that they had just become NDIS registered themselves. And I said to them, well, if you've become NDIS registered, well, what products are you actually selling that are actually inclusive and accessible tools? They were really actually good once I got talking to the right people about getting the inclusive tools in their stores. When we talk about being stocked by them, we're still only online. So that's the next challenge, is actually getting them onto the actual shop shelves in store.
So Bunnings or Baby Bunting?
All of them. Bunnings, Chemist Warehouse and Baby Bunting, we're all online, but we're not actually in store in their shelves. So that's the next conversation where we sort of say, well, the whole idea about being accessible is that people can actually come in and just easily get it. Online's great. And like, for example, if you have a physical disability, I mean, getting it delivered to your front door is going to be obviously a lot easier than getting out to a shop. But it just also takes away that barrier of actually being able to physically touch and see something.
Correct.
When we look at, things like our mushy mats, for example, they're our soft padded play mat. People want to actually stand on it, sit on it, touch it, feel it. So that's probably still one of our barriers that we're working on. Yes, we're very proud to be in these major retailers, but there's still more work to do.
Right. So I'm really curious, what do Bunnings stock of your range?
They've got our mushy mat, which is our padded floor mat. They've got our giant crash mat pillow, which is like a large pillow that you can literally just crash into or you can lounge on it. And then they've got a lot of our education tools. So they've got our wobble stool, which is like a height adjustable stool that allows active movement. They've got the wobble cushions, so you can move around while you're sitting, using up like restless energy and still focusing. We've got these giant magnetic tiles that are like felt based that you can build things like major cubbies and things like that. Right. And then they've got kind of like our smaller education tools, like a timer that has like a visual countdown on it and things like that.
Really, it's just so interesting how kind of the more traditional brands are now expanding into this space. I find it really interesting.
Yeah, these sensory tools actually benefit everyone.
So very much in line with, our research and what we see in terms of sensory-friendly retail. Where do you think the sector's heading?
I have to bring up yesterday, I was actually having a media interview and it was about this Reddit post. And it had when you go into a big shopping centre and it's got like those seats in the middle?
Yes.
The comfy seats where you can just sit and
like lounge.
Yeah. So this conversation was, are these just like the boyfriend seats or the dad seats? When the men get sick of the women shopping, they go here and sit. And I said, no, this is absolutely not. Yes, it caters to those individuals who don't really enjoy the shopping. But I was like, this is just part of the inclusive accessibility journey in the retail space. If you are elderly, if you're physically disabled, if you are a mum that's got a baby, for example, or even if you have an invisible disability, all of these seats are a space for them to sit, take a rest and reset. I still think there's definitely room for improvement. The other day I was actually talking to a customer who has cerebral palsy and she's in a wheelchair, and she was actually saying how she likes the fact that we deliver because she actually doesn't have much confidence getting out to actual retail shops because she's scared that she'll knock things over with her wheelchair when she's trying to get down the aisles.
We have a little bit of a way to go, but to your point, I'm seeing that there's much more appetite for understanding the research and having the conversation and recognising that retail has always been very traditionally catered for the neurotypical, the neuromajority. There's much more exciting conversations to be had and lots of opportunities. So, look, thank you so much. That's been a really interesting conversation, and I wish you all the best with the sensory specialist. We'll include some information about where people can find your products, and look forward to catching up again and to hear that you've actually gotten your products in store and not just online.
The next step.
Yes. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to chat.
If you found value in today's chat, the best way to support the podcast is to share it with a colleague. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And I'm always eager to hear your takeaways, so do drop me a DM on Instagram at Inclusive Change or send me an email. All the links to connect with me and to learn more about today's guests are waiting for you in the episode description. Thanks again for being here, and I'll catch you next time.